With Bitcoin still above the $90,000 level, many are wondering if Bitcoin can continue to move higher or if a retracement may be overdue. So let's look at the key price levels to watch over the coming weeks for BTC. Today we're going to be looking at the key Bitcoin levels to be watching over the coming days and weeks, and where better to start than the golden ratio multiplier chart we have here on BitcoinMagazinePro.com. Now this is looking at the 350-day moving average, which is this orange line here, and then multiplying that by a number of golden ratio Fibonacci values. So for example, this green line is the 1.6 value, and this red line above that is the 2 value. And what we can see if we just zoom out looking at a daily chart is historically throughout Bitcoin's price cycles, we see diminishing values reached on this metric. So we can see in the first cycle back here, this reached this 8 value, and then in the next cycle it reached the 5, and then the previous cycle it reached the 3. So we're kind of anticipating something similar to happen this cycle. And if we just zoom in, we can actually see when we reached our previous high at around $73,000, this is actually the resistance level BTC hit before topping out and an 8 months period of consolidation, which wasn't that fun. But as Bitcoin is now rallying above $90,000 to new all-time highs, we can see we are actually quite close to this second 1.6 value green line, which is currently around 96 going towards $97,000. So it's probably only about a week or two away from actually hitting that $100,000 level that we're also keen to see Bitcoin hit. But above that, we are seeing the red level, this 2 line, which we are potentially anticipating BTC to peak at about $120,000. But do take into consideration that, like I said, these values are moving up all the time. And below us, that 350-day is just above $60,000, which usually acts as a very strong level of support if we were to have a pretty catastrophic move to the downside after running up to $90,000. What we can also see is if we just move onto the TradingView chart here, if we add these onto the chart, that these are actually providing a little bit of confluence. Like we said, this green line, this 1.6, is running up towards about $100,000, which if we just add that on as a key big psychological round number on the chart, these usually act as support and resistance levels for Bitcoin, that at some point these are going to reach and provide a pretty strong level of resistance if BTC is to continue rallying higher. But I would kind of imagine BTC to potentially be front run slightly from that point. Basically, as we're reaching $100,000, there's someone that's going to say, you know, I'm going to sell at $99,000 just to make sure that I can lock in some profit. Then somebody probably is going to anticipate that and start selling at $98,000. So I would think that kind of that $95,000 to $100,000 region is going to be a pretty key level of resistance for us, especially if I just zoom out here. And one way we can actually kind of gauge potential target points for price when we're in price discovery mode, because obviously previously we could see previous all-time highs and levels of support and resistance for price action, but when we're reaching prices we've never reached before, it's a little bit harder to do, obviously. But what we can do is use a Fibonacci retracement, or in this case extension tool. And if I just draw that from our most recent low we had as we were consolidating to the high we had previously set around $73,000. These basically extend into the future and give us, similar to what we see with the golden ratio with a 1.618, 1.786, etc., Fibonacci sequence extension levels. And what we can see is these, especially if we drop down to a lower time frame, have already had a little bit of an influence on the Bitcoin price action, calling this level of resistance before we broke through, and then resistance and support. And again, the most recent level of support before Bitcoin, as I film this, has just rallied even slightly higher. And the level above us is just around $95,000. So I do think that $95,000 to $100,000 region is going to be a pretty key level to try and break through, but it will probably take a little bit of time. To be honest, I could see something similar to, if I just go back onto the daily chart here, all the way back in our previous cycle when we were trying to break above our previous all-time high around $20,000 here, we could see we had Bitcoin's price kind of initially reach just around that level before it was rejected. But then we kind of get this coiling up in price action, which is usually actually quite bullish, where price runs up, retraces quite heavily, runs up again, retraces slightly less, and then price is kind of coiling up. And this is very bullish to see, because basically every time we're reaching this point and sellers come in, start taking some profit and shorting, each time they do that, we're getting a smaller and smaller retracement, meaning that the buyers are probably having more and more influence and power as price moves higher. And then we did break through that, if I can just find the right tool. Bitcoin rallied pretty much non-stop to 40 and then 60 plus $1,000. So if we could do something similar this cycle, that would be great to see Bitcoin rally above that $100,000 level. But we do have to acknowledge, of course, that Bitcoin could actually see a little bit of retracement from where we are. It's not often you see an asset rally 10, 20, $30,000 practically, pretty much without any pullback or at least a little bit of consolidation. So if we were to have a little bit of retracement, again, I think if we just drop down to a lower time frame, we could see around that $80,000 level, another key psychological number, being a really key level of support if we were to move lower. And then just slightly beneath those now, again, around $90,000 has already acted as support quite a few times. But if we just add on the 200 daily moving average, which is if I just zoom out here, we can see that this is moving up. If I just go onto the daily chart here, this is moving up quite rapidly. So right now it's currently at around $65,000. But again, it's probably only about a couple days, weeks really, away from being around that $70,000 level, which again, if we just add on to the chart, has been a pretty key level for Bitcoin's price action, especially as we were ranging for many months. This acted as resistance multiple times before Bitcoin broke higher. So I'd imagine that 70K level being a very key level of support if we were to break beneath even 80, which also aligns very nicely with the short-term holder realized price. This is the average accumulation or cost basis for new market participants, which if we just zoom in is currently at around $70,000. But again, moving up. So if we were to break substantially lower beneath $80,000, which I don't think is very likely, then 70K would be a very key level to be watching. But a couple of reasons why we may be getting slightly overheated is if we look at something like the Bitcoin funding rates, we can see this is starting to get quite high. Now, this isn't saying that Bitcoin funding rates can't stay high for weeks or even months at a time, like we saw at our previous run up to an all-time high, but it's never great to see an excessive amount of leverage longs in the space. If we just go back to the chart here and zoom out a little bit, what we can see as well is if we add on the Bitcoin Crosby ratio, here we can see that we are reaching this upper region, which is maybe signaling that Bitcoin is slightly overheated and overextended to the upside. But again, this doesn't mean that we can't continue. We could see at our previous all-time high, this started entering just before Bitcoin's topping out. So we could see really potentially to that $95,000, $100,000 region before we do start to see a little bit of retracement. But anytime we are getting into this overheated territory, it usually indicates that at least a little bit of a cool-off period is upcoming. So it'll be definitely interesting to watch these values over the coming days and weeks to see how Bitcoin reacts. But really, you don't need to overcomplicate things. As we're currently around $92,000, you can just pin on your chart that 90, 80, and 70K as major levels of support. And then above us, that $95,000 to $100,000 region is obviously going to be a pretty big area of resistance. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on bitcoinmagazinepro.com, your number one source for Bitcoin analysis. And very quickly, something I forgot to mention is if we just look at the Bitcoin market cap, which is currently about 1.8 trillion, that $2 trillion level might be another source of resistance as well. And as Bitcoin's circulating supply is currently around 19.8 million, that also reaches around $100,000 level. So anyone who's just looking at BTC by market cap may see that $100,000 level as a major level of resistance. But it is great to see Bitcoin has overtaken silver as the second hardest asset on earth. Obviously, the target would be gold, but a $17.7 trillion market cap may be slightly out of reach this cycle. But it will be interesting to see how far Bitcoin can actually move up this leaderboard for the rest of this bull market. So just to summarize, as Bitcoin rallies to new all-time highs, it can be quite difficult to predict the future levels that we need to be watching that are going to influence price action, but we can keep it simple, look at those big psychological levels of $100,000 and then the golden ratio multiplier, which is moving up between around $95,000 and $100,000 as well, probably providing some confluence of resistance above us, especially as funding rates are getting slightly high. And looking at something like the Crosby ratio, we are maybe slightly overextended to the upside. That is probably going to be a key level of sell-side pressure, but beneath current price, we can see that there's major support around $70,000 in a, well, I won't say worst case scenario because we have to be open to any possibility. But if we were to see around a 25% retracement, then that $70,000 level does have the confluence of the 200 daily moving average, our previous all-time highs, short-term holder realized price. So I think that'd be a really key level of support if we will move lower. But even higher than that, I think $90,000 will be a short-term support level. But if we are to move lower, then I think 80K will be a pretty big level to be watching as well. But ultimately, things are still looking positive. Anytime we see Bitcoin rally like this, obviously, it can't be sustained forever, but this type of buy side pressure really indicates and shows the strength that Bitcoin has as buyers are flooding into the market, as Bitcoin still remains fairly illiquid. So it wouldn't surprise me if we were to potentially see Bitcoin continue this upside move, and even after a slight retracement, if we see something like we saw when we initially broke through $20,000 a couple cycles ago, then that could be something that really propels us to that six-figure level and even beyond that. If you like this video, then please visit bitcoinmagazinepro.com, where our analytics help you to cut through the noise to make informed, data-driven decisions about Bitcoin. With over 150 live charts, personalized indicator alerts, in-depth crypto industry reports, API access, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are and what levels you'll be watching for Bitcoin over the coming days and weeks. Do you ever perform technical analysis like this? If you do, let me know what kind of analysis you do. Do you use Elliott waves and other more funky strategies, or do you like to keep it simple like me with just some big round numbers on your chart? As I said, let me know in the comments below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.